Good evening, everyone. Good evening, the general, and good evening to everyone that will be watching this video later. Um,
Good evening.
Good evening. Like I discussed with you guys on the group that we are going to be looking at a very interesting topic in JavaScript, which is DOM, Document Object Model. All right. So, and our goal is to be able to build this. If not today, we'll build this tomorrow. So I already sent the starter file to you guys in the group. So check the group. You will see I sent it as a zip folder. You check the group, you will see it there as a zip folder. Um Coming. Yes, I sent it to the group. So the zip folder name is class 7. So go to the group and unzip the file and move the class 7 into the what they call it to the move it into JavaScript Simplified Course. Move it into JavaScript Simplified Course folder. Move it there. All right. So I already have it here. Class 7. You get at the index. This is the index.html, and also this is the style.css. So want to use this project to learn document object model. All right, so that's that. Now, so what I'm going to do here is I already have the folder in the parent folder, class 7. So I'm just going to create a new file and I'll call this script.js. So let me check my index.html if I've linked it. Okay, yes, I have done that. I've linked my script tag to the HTML. All right, good. So, and this is what we have here. That's what we have here. So apparently it is not functional now. If I type anything and I press check, I click on check, nothing is happening. Nothing is happening at all. So we are just going to look at an introduction to document object model today. Then by tomorrow we'll create functionalities for this project. We will start this project and finish it tomorrow. But let's just look at introduction to JavaScript. All right, so let me pull out my notes. So I have my notes set up here. Uh, I have two notes I'm going to be referencing for this DOM manipulation course. All right, so now what is DOM? We've looked at we've treated a lot of topics in JavaScript, even though that's not all. But let's zoom on DOM. What exactly is DOM? So before me, DOM stands for Document Object Model. DOM stands for Document Object Model, and it is a programming interface. It is a programming interface for web documents, especially when a web page is especially essentially when a web page is loaded in a web browser. We are talking about your HTML and CSS. So when a web page is loaded into a web browser, the browser, that means whatever browser you are using, whether it is Microsoft Edge, Chrome, or whatever. So the browser that you are using will create a document object model of the page, which is a hierarchical tree. tree-like structure representing the elements and their relationship within the document. Each element, attribute, and piece of text in the HTML document becomes a node in the DOM tree. I'm going to explain all of this, don't worry. So document object model manipulation, or you can call it DOM manipulation, refers to the process of changing, updating the structure, the content, or the styles of the DOM tree using programming languages such as JavaScript. This manipulation, DOM manipulation, can involve adding, removing, or modifying elements. When I mean modify, it means changing elements and attributes in the DOM tree dynamically based on user action, user events, or other factors. DOM manipulation is a fundamental aspect of web development as it allows developers to create dynamic and interactive web pages. All right, dynamic and interactive web pages. So let's look at the other note that I have here. Yeah, it says that DOM stands for Document Object Model. DOM is a platform and language neutral interface that allows programs and scripts to dynamically access and update the content, structures, and styles of a document. Simply put, it is an interface that allows developers to interact and control the elements of the web. DOM acts as an interface between document and JavaScript. Using DOM plus JavaScript, developers can access and modify each and every element of the document using DOM. There are three parts of DOM. We have the core DOM, XML DOM, and we have the HTML DOM. But our focus will be on the HTML DOM. So HTML DOM is a standard model for HTML document. Now listen, this is where it gets interesting. It says when a web page is loaded, the browser creates a document object model of the page. It creates a document object model of the page. The HTML DOM model is constructed as a tree of objects. All right, so this is what it means here. We have our index.html in our Visual Studio Code, and we also have what our style.css. Then we open it with a live server. We come here, we open with live server so that it will be displayed in the browser, which we did here. The moment the web page, or what I mean by web page, the moment our HTML document loads on the browser, what happens is the browser creates a document object model of that page. So it creates an HTML and CSS document of that page. So that is why when you inspect, for instance, if you right click to inspect, you will see here, you will see something like elements, console, and source. So this shouldn't be new to you. So let me bring this down here. Now look at everything that we have in our HTML is what we can find here. Can you see HTML? Look at document HTML, doc type HTML, the HTML, then you have the header. You see that? Then you have, look at everything that we have in the HTML in our Visual Studio Code. Is what we have here. Everything. You see that? Is what we have here. Everything. So what happens is this: when you when you open your HTML code using live server on your browser, the browser immediately creates a document of that page. All right, it creates a document of that page. So that's what it's telling us here, that when a web page is loaded in the browser, what the browser does is to create a document object model of the page, a model of that page that was uploaded in the browser. So hold on. So let's move on. Now, with the HTML DOM, JavaScript can access and can change all the elements of an HTML document. So look at the structure here. You have the document at the top of this tree-like shape. You have the document. Then you have your HTML, and you have inside of the HTML you have the header and the body. So all of your HTML code will be inside of this document object. So document object, all of your HTML code will be inside of the document object. So that is why it says that when your web page loads on the browser creates a document object model of the page. So all of your HTML code will be inside of what? The document. So they are now called HTML DOM elements. All right, HTML DOM elements. So you see that now. All right, so now what can we do with these elements using JavaScript? Knowing now that when your web page loads in the browser, it creates a document object model of that browser. So what can we now do with that element, the DOM HTML DOM element, using JavaScript? Number one, we can use JavaScript to change and to add nodes in the DOM. Shortly, we are going to look at the meaning of nodes. But just know that JavaScript can be used on this element to change and to add nodes in the DOM. Then JavaScript can add or change the style of the DOM element. JavaScript also can set a new attribute to the DOM element and can remove and modify older attributes. That's three. Number four, JavaScript can add new elements into the document structure, the DOM structure. And also, JavaScript can create and add events to the DOM element. We'll also look at event. Also, JavaScript can delete elements from the DOM tree. So you can see a lot of things that JavaScript can do here. So now, what are DOM nodes in HTML DOM? What are nodes in HTML DOM? Because here it says that JavaScript can change and add nodes in the DOM. So what are nodes? So the document object model, or the DOM in short form, comprises different types of nodes. Each node in the DOM tree is identified by a node type. So we have four types of nodes in HTML DOM. We have element node, we have attribute node, we have text node, and we have comment node. All of these, they are called nodes. All right. So take for example all these elements now, they are called element node. Then if you have an attribute like a class, they are called attribute node. You get that now? And if you have a comment here, okay, apparently I don't have a comment. They are also called what? Comment what? Node. And we also have text node. So those are the content in between the opening tag and closing tag of some of the HTML elements. So there are four types of node: element node, attribute node, text node, and what? Content node. Sorry, comment node. So the element node both comprises of the tags and the content. You get that now? So, but there are HTML elements that doesn't have content, like earlier image, whereby you have to use attributes. So all of those things. This is not HTML class, so let's leave that. So four types of node. So now when you come here, it says JavaScript can change and add nodes in the DOM. It means that JavaScript can change and add, whether it can add element node, text node, comment node, and attribute node in the what? In the DOM. So that's what it simply means. All right. So now, what are DOM methods and properties? I hope you are following me. What are DOM methods and properties? So HTML DOM is not just used to create, the browser does not just create um, the document object model of our page only, but there are methods that we can use on these elements, and there are properties that we can use on this element provided by DOM. Because DOM is not part of JavaScript. Please listen. DOM is not a core topic, like a core essential in JavaScript. DOM is a browser's API. API simply means application programming interface. We are going to look into this topic API in a much later time from now. All right. But just know that DOM is a browser's API. It's not JavaScript core um topic. Or yes. All right. So it is a browser's API. So, and there are methods and properties that we can use in conjunction with JavaScript to be able to access, select the element and do all kinds of things. So what are methods? So methods, these are actions that you perform on HTML elements, such as adding or deleting or even accessing an HTML element. When I mean accessing, selecting an HTML element. And when we talk about properties, these are values of HTML elements that you can set or what change, that you can set or change. So we are going to look at that as well. So the first thing that we need to understand, or that we need to look at in manipulating DOM element, is first of all selecting the DOM element. Here it says that the document object represents your web page. So it says if you want to access any element in an HTML page, you always start with accessing the document object. All right. It's just like I've taught you object literal, whereby if you have a person object and you have some properties and value defined in a person object, for you to be able to access the property, you must first of all access the person object. All right. So that's how document is. So document object is what makes up our web page. So our HTML element is in the document object. So in order for us to be able to access any elements in our HTML element, in order for us to be able to access any HTML element or DOM element, we need to first of all have access to the document object, because all the HTML elements are in the document object. So to select any element or to access any element, you have to access it through the document object. All right. So there are several ways we can select DOM elements in JavaScript. Yes, it says there are different ways to select a DOM element in JavaScript. JavaScript provides 6 methods to select an element from the document. JavaScript provides 6 elements to select, 6 methods to select an element from the document. Number one is get element by ID. Get element by ID. So let's start by understanding how to select DOM elements in JavaScript. Selecting a DOM element in JavaScript is similar to CSS selector. When you want to style an HTML element in CSS, you have to first of all select the element. So you can select the element using different types, whether type of element selector, class selector, ID selector, child selector, descendant selector, sibling selector. They are different. The possibilities is many. The possibilities are many. So that's how it is for JavaScript. Because for you to be able to manipulate, meaning to change, manipulation simply means to change the original state of something. So for you to be able to manipulate any element, first of all, the first thing that you need is to select the element. And we have 6 methods provided by DOM that helps us to be able to select HTML elements. So the number one is get element by ID. So if you go to um what do we have here now? If you go to the HTML page file. If you look at our code here, let's see which element has a class, has an ID value. Apparently none. None. All right, so probably I will have to change some to ID. I'll have to change some classes here to ID. So let me change this class here. So please, for those that are just joining us now, I already sent the zip folder to the group. You will see that the name of the zip folder is called class 7. So unzip the folder, then move the file into the JavaScript simplified course folder. All right, just like we have it here. So yeah, in this class attribute here, I'm going to change it from class to what? ID. All right, let's see which one we can change again. Let me also change this button from, okay, no, let me not change that. Okay, if I change this now, it's going to affect the CSS. You see that it's going to affect the CSS. So um what can we do here? Because I need to show you how to select by ID. All right, let me just change this to ID first. I'm going to change it back to class. I'll change this to ID, and what again? I'll change this number to ID as well. Fantastic. So let me check my CSS if there's anyone that I selected by a class. Okay, can I see in between now? I'm going to change it from class to hash. Then also we have number here. I'll change it from class to hash. So I'm going to change it back anyways. So if I save, I think I should have it. Okay, good, 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 good. So we are good to go. All right. So okay, let's go to our script.js, and let's select our HTML element using get element by ID. All right. Get element by ID. So we have this ID whose value is between, and we have another ID whose value is what? Number. So I'll come here. In order for me to be able to select that element, all I just have to do is to access the document. So I'll say document, then dot. To be able to access all the methods that we're going to be using and the properties that we're also going to be using is inside of the document. So for us to be able to have access to that document method, we have to use dot. All right. So, and I already taught you object, that there are two ways to be able to access properties of an object. Is either use the dot notation or use what? The bracket notation. But the dot notation is very, very common, very, very mostly used compared to the bracket what notation. All right. So I will say document, then dot. The moment I type dot, all the properties and methods in the document object will pop up here. Can you see? We have a lot of methods and property here. You see that? But anyways, what I'm interested in is get element by ID. So look at it here. The second one, get element by ID. So I'll press enter to generate it for me. So since it's a method, it has to have a parenthesis. All right. So now what this get element by ID does is it only select an element that has a particular ID. So since the HTML element is already in the document, all right, the HTML, our web page is in the document object model. Our HTML element is in the document object model. So what happens is once we say get element by ID, we type get element by ID. So this method will check through the document, the HTML elements, and check is there any element that has a particular ID value. So that's what I want to look at now. So I'll put it in a string. So the one we are trying to select is the one that has a ID value of what? Between. So I'll come here, I'll type between. All right. So I'm going to assign this to a variable. I can console the log it direct, but let me just assign it to a variable. I'll call it const. What should I call the variable name now? Okay, let's call it let's call it range. Okay, let's call it range because here we're having between 1 to 20. So let's give it a name range like this. So if I console the log, now watch, if I console the log range, let's see what we are going to get. Let's see what we are going to get. So I'm going to inspect. So let me change the dock size from this to this. All right, so probably let me make it a bit smaller. Aha. Okay. All right, good. I think it's nice like this. So come to the console. Now look at what we have. The paragraph has been selected. You see, the paragraph has been selected. So everything that we have in the paragraph also is selected and console. You see ID between. You see the content between 1 and 20. That is selecting an element by its ID value. Selecting an element by its ID value. All right. So I hope you understand this before I move on to the next one. Now, we've looked at how we can select a DOM element using get element by ID. So what get element by ID does is to search the element by its ID value. So then we now have another one that is called get elements by tag name. Get element by tag name. This get element by tag name is similar to type or element selector in CSS. Type or element selector in CSS. Why get element by ID is similar to ID selector in CSS. So now get elements by tag name. Now observe there's a difference between get element by ID, the get element in the get element by ID, and get elements by the in the get elements by tag name. Notice for the get element by ID, the element is single. Get element. So you are only allowed, so you can only get one element. But if you look at here, get elements by tag name. All right, see that now. So this the element there is plural. Please take note. And I'm going to show you something now. So let's look at how we can get elements by tag name. So let's go back to our HTML. Let's see which element we can get by its tag name. Okay, um let's select all the paragraphs. All the paragraphs. I'm going to select all the paragraphs. So I'll come here. I'll give it const. I'll say all paragraph equals document dot get elements by tag name. So what will be the tag name? The tag name, yeah, it has to be in a quote. Can you see when I did the quote, it's bringing out all the tags that we have. So the one I'm interested in is P, and I save. Now watch. Let's console the log. For console the log, that's all paragraph. Let's see the result is going to bring out in the console. Now can you see? It's giving us an array, an HTML collection of all the paragraphs that we have in the HTML DOM. And you might be looking, is this is not, this is an HTML collection. This is not a real array. It's just an array like, but not what a real what array. But you can still loop over it. Just like the way I taught you how to loop over an array using for loop, for off loop, and yeah, for off loop. So I showed you that. So you can still use any of those methods to loop over this array like um, um, structure that we have here. So this is an HTML collection. This is an HTML collection, and I'm going to give you a classwork, sorry, an assignment to 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 differentiate between HTML collection and node list. I think I'll type that on the group. So that will be after this class for now. All right. So now we have four elements in this paragraph. We have the paragraph with an ID of between. We have the paragraph with a class attribute of message. We have the paragraph with a class attribute of label score, and we have the paragraph with a class attribute of label I score. All right. So these are all the paragraphs that we have, and it is returned to us as an HTML collection, an array like shape. So this is that now, hence the reason why it is called get elements plural. So even though it is one element that you select, let's say for example, how many H1 do we have here? We only have one H1. So if you select this H1 using get elements by tag name, is he going to return what? Is he going to return HTML collection? Let me show you that so that you believe me. So let me call this H1, and I'll say document dot get elements by tag name, and I'll give this H1. So let me console.log it H1. All right, you see that, and let's see the result. Can you see? Where is it? I can't find it. Where is my H1? Where are you, H1? All right, let me refresh this page. All right, can you see? We have the H1 here. HTML collection H1. Though it's one element that we selected, though, but return it as an HTML collection. You see that now? It will be in an array like form. You see? So I rarely, I rarely use get elements by tag name. I rarely use it. In fact, not that I rarely, I don't use it. I only use it for teaching purposes. So I'm just to for you to be aware that there's a method called get elements by tag name. The method I use most of the time whenever I'm working with JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript, is get element by ID and query selector and query selector. That's if I'm working with vanilla JavaScript. All right. But in React, I don't need all of this. So after this JavaScript class, there's going to be a React course as well. So you can do well to also um, register for it too. Okay, so let's move on. Now we have get elements by ID. We have the paragraph. So it selected the four paragraphs that we have here as an array like. But there's a way we can convert this array like, this all paragraph. There's a way we can convert it to a real array, not array like. So how do we convert it to a real array? To convert an array like to a real array, there's a method called array.from. So this array.from method allows you to be able to convert an array like to what? An original array. So I can wrap this this document.get element by tag, and I can wrap it inside of the array dot from method. I can do it like that, or I can just create a separate variable and pass the all paragraph into the array dot from. But to make our work very easy, let me just cut this. I'll call this, then I'll do array, capital letter A, array dot from, like this. Then I'll paste what I just cut. So if I save this now and you come to the browser, you'll notice it's no longer going to be an array like. It's no longer an array like. It's now what, an original array. So the HTML collection has been removed. Now this is what, an original what, array. So I can loop over it. It doesn't mean that you can't loop over an HTML collection. You can. So I can loop over this all paragraph. I can say, okay, for let p of all paragraphs, and I can then I can console the log, or I can console the log p. You see that when I console the log p, now watch what we are going to get. Can you see can you see all the paragraphs, the four paragraphs? One, two, three, and four. You see that? Fantastic. So, and I can do anything, I can do something nice with it, but let's not go ahead of ourselves. Don't worry, because I could style it, I could change the text, I could do, a lot of things with it, but let's take it gradually. All right. So let me comment this console.log p. So let's look at other methods that we can use to select DOM element. So we have get elements by class name. Get elements by class name. Get elements by class name. All right. So let me show you. So back to our HTML. Let's see. Now, if you observe, we can select the button. We can almost all these elements has a class attribute, but I can select the button because if you notice, the button each of the button is having two classes. There's a generic class and there is a specific class. So the generic class is the btn. Look at btn. We have another button called what, btn. Any other button again? No. So we have two buttons in this HTML code. So, and the two button has a generic class name, which is what, btn and btn, and they have a unique class value. So for the first button you have again, and for the second button you have what, check. So let's say, for example, I want to select these two buttons by their generic class value. So I can come here and I'll do const. I'll say btn equals document dot get elements by class name. So what will be the class name? btn. So I save. So let's console the log btn, and let's see the results. Can you see? It is also giving us what, an HTML collection. HTML collection. So get elements by tag name gives us HTML collection. Get elements by class name also gives us what, HTML collection. You see that now? All right. So that is for class name. Then we also have get element by name. This get element by name mostly works with, not mostly, works with input that has a name attribute. So let's check our input here, our HTML. I think we only have one input here, but the input does not have a name. So let me just give it a name attribute. I'll give it a name attribute of number. So you can add that to your own too as well. I'll give it a name attribute of number. All right, so I'll come here. I'll say const. Let's call it num, and I'll say, okay, num input. num input, and here I will say document dot get elements by name. So what's the name? The name is number. Okay, the value of the name attribute is what? Number. So let's see, let's console the log this. Console the log number. Sorry, num input. My apologies. Num input. So let's see what we have here. And can you see it's giving us a node list. It's returning an array, but not an original array, an array like. So there are two types. So we have HTML collection and we have node list. So there are two methods that gives us HTML collection. Get elements by tag name and get elements by class name. So but get elements by name give us a node list. So your assignment will be go and search on make a research on the difference between HTML collection and node list. HTML collection and node list. So tomorrow when we are going to be meeting again, we'll have that discussion. All right, before the class starts properly. Okay, so we've looked at one. Okay, how many have we looked at now? One, two, three, and four. So I think we have two more to go, and that is query selector and query selector. The beautiful thing about this query selector and query selector is that I don't know how I'm going to call it. It's like one in all. So it does all the whole things. There's a name for it. You get that now? It does everything. Everything. You can use query selector to select an element by his ID value. You can use query selector to select an element by his tag name. You can use query selector to select an element by his tag name, his class name. I can use query selector to select an element by his name attributes. And it even goes beyond that. You can use query selector like the way you use CSS selector, where you can select a child from a parent. You can do sibling selector, direct child selector, direct sibling selector, adjacent sibling selector, descendant selector. You can do all of those things using query selector. Query selector is a very, very powerful method. Very, very powerful method. I use it every time. Every time whenever I'm working with vanilla JavaScript. All right. Query selector. So now, query selector returns the first element that matches the specified selector. I repeat, query selector returns the first element. Please, emphasis on the first element. It returns the first element that matches the specified selector. So now let's go back to our HTML. Let's say we want to select um let us select hold on. Mm, okay, we are going to use query selector to select several things, but let's start with this section, or let's start with this number. The number that has the ID, the number this div that has the ID value of what? Number. Yeah, I guess so. So let's come here. Let's use query selector. So let me demarcate it. Let me put a comment here. Just hold on. So yeah, I'll do selecting DOM elements. So under it, we have get element by ID. Then we now have get elements by tag name. Then here we have get elements by class name. So the next one I want to look at will now be query selector. All right, so I think it's better like this. It's better like this. So all right, so let's select this div that has the ID of number. So I'll come here. I'll say const. I'll just give it num equals. So I'll just say document dot query selector in a quote. So now, since we are selecting an ID value, then there's a way we need to do it here, because query selector does not, you have to be explicit when it comes to using query selector. You have to be explicit, be detailed. Unlike get element by ID, whereby you just get element by ID, what it does is select an element by its ID value. But for query selector, you have to be explicit in the sense that if you are selecting an ID attribute, then you have to provide the symbol for an ID, which is what? Hash. Then the value of the ID. The value of the ID is what? Number. So this is how it works. So that query selector will know that the selecting is trying to select an element that has this ID. So that ID there is the hash that we have there. You get that now? The hash. So if you come here and you console the log, if you console the log num now, you see what we have. We have, what is it? You can see ID num. Let me refresh so that you see. I'm coming. So can you see that this is it? Good. So the next thing that I want us to look at, what is it? Will be how we can use query selector to select a class attribute. So which class attribute we should look at now? So let's select iScore. Let's select iScore. This one here. It has a span of score. It's a span tag that has a class attribute of score. It has a class attribute of score. So let's see it. So I'll come here. I'll create another variable. I'll call it const. Then I'll call it score. So I'll say document dot query selector. So now I am selecting a class attribute, not an ID. So to select a class, the symbol for class is dot. Then the name of the value of the class, which is what? Score. You see that now? So this is how it is being done using query selector. All right. So if you save that now, you are good to go. Now look at, we have the span here that has the class of score, and the text or the content is 20. Good. We are going somewhere, because the first step to manipulating an HTML element or DOM element is to select the element. You cannot manipulate what you have not selected. So you have to select using the methods that I'm teaching you now before manipulation can take place. All right. So the manipulation there can be removing or deleting the content, deleting the element itself, or updating, modifying, adding styles, changing the content, you know, adding attributes, removing the old ones. All of many things that you can do actually. So now, let's see what we can also do with query selector again. Let's say, for example, I want to select um an element here that has the same class name, the same class value. Um, Okay, that will still be button, because button has two classes, and the first class are generic class. So I'm just going to come here. I'll do const. I already have a variable called btn up there, so I'll just say btn query, so that we can differentiate it from the one we have here. So here I'll do document dot query selector a string, then I'll do dot btn, then you save. All right, so now let's see what we are going to get. Console.log btn query, because the one we selected, the button, that means that it's going to select these two buttons because it has a class of what, btn. So let's see the result, if truly it's going to select um the two buttons, or maybe it's going to select one. So let's see. Apparently it selected what, one, but there are two buttons there, but it selected one. This goes to explain this the meaning of query selector. It returns the first element that matches the specified selector. So the specified selector here is .btn. So the first element that matches the .btn will be returned. So even though you have other elements that matches that, it will not return it. It will only return the first. But if you want to return all the occurrences or the instances of the class that has the value of btn, then you don't use query selector, you use query selector all. So here I'll just do selector query selector all. Then here I can just say const all buttons. Yeah, can say all btn document dot query selector all. Then I'll say dot btn. Then I save. So if you console.log all btn and you save, so let's see what we get. Now we are getting a node list. You see that now? So there are two HTML collection and there are two node lists. Two HTML collection and two node list. All right. So the method that generates HTML collection are get elements by tag name and get elements by class name. So the two that generates a node list are get elements by name and get and query selector all. So like I said, go and research on the difference between HTML collection and node list. So next time we'll be meeting, that will be our major discussion before moving to the class proper. All right, so I think we've done justice to um, HTML selecting DOM element. So the next thing that we're going to look at is getting and setting content of DOM elements in JavaScript. So let me check this other notes here. So this was the one I gave to you guys. So you see, this method selects the first element that matches a specified CSS selector. All right, so and then so with query selector or query selector, we can use CSS selector directly in JavaScript. CSS, so this is powerful. And there's also another way we can select elements from the DOM by transversing the DOM. This is a topic on its own, which I don't want us to look at now. So manipulating DOM elements, we have create elements. So this one too, we'll look at all of these later. Okay, so my major focus will be this text content, inner HTML, Yeah, inner HTML. So all right, but let me show you something on query selector. I told you that you can use any CSS selector used in the query selector. So let's say, for example, we have let me check. Let's say okay, we have this section. We have this section with a class of what? With a class value of right, and it has like three children. It has three elements inside of it. So they are called children, three children elements inside of the section. The first one is a paragraph with a class value of message. The second one is a paragraph with a class value of label score. And the third one is a paragraph with a class value of label I score. So now let's say I want to select the first paragraph relative to its parent element. So child this can be direct child or child selector, or can even be descendant selector. So that means I will have to select the parent before I select um the child. So let's see how we can do that using Java, what they call it, query selector. So it works for both query selector and query selector all anyways. So let me just do that. So I'll say const msg, which represent message for short. So now what I'll do, document dot query selector, and the section where the message is called right. The class value is right, so I'll say dot right. Then since I want to select the child element, that's a paragraph inside of this section, then I can do greater than. Now say dot message. This is a child selector. So you can see how powerful query selector and query selector all is. Very powerful. They're very, very powerful. So I'll just console the log. I'll console the log msg. That's message. And let's see what we have here. You see the message here. Look at it. Fantastic. All right. So let's look at getting and setting content of DOM elements in JavaScript. Probably this might be where we are going to stop for today. So on tomorrow, we'll start working on the project, and next time we meet again, that will be next week. We'll also look at other aspects, transversing the DOM and all and all. Then we'll look at another project. Then we'll now go back to other topics that we need to treat. Then afterwards, we'll go back to DOM. Then from there, we'll go back to other topics. We do some other project. Then we can end JavaScript. All right. So all right. So let's move on. So getting and setting content of DOM elements in JavaScript. So there are three methods, but the one that is mostly used out of these three are just two. So which are inner HTML and text content. But there are three methods that three properties. There are properties actually. There are three properties that we can use to get content of a DOM element or to set content of a DOM element. So they are inner HTML, inner text, and text content. So inner text and text content, they are similar but different from inner HTML. So if you read the text here, the text content in details, here it says text content is a property in JavaScript used to represent the text content of a node and all its descendants. It allows you to get or set the text content of an element. Text content returns the text content of all elements under the specified node, including any nested element, but it doesn't return any markup, HTML markup. Let me explain that. Let's explain that with practical. So, let's say we have, I think the best explanation to this is this paragraph. So we have a paragraph, and the content of the paragraph is this 100 and scores. Then it now has a span nested inside of the paragraph. It has a span nested inside of the paragraph. You see this span here nested inside of the paragraph. So let's say we want to get the text content. That means the content of the paragraph that has a class of what? Label score. So I can come here. Um, so let me do it here. So let me select const label score. Let's do label score. Is that what we have there? Yeah, label score. Then we have document dot query selector. Then here, what's the class value is label score. So I'll come and I'll say dot label score. Now under here, let's do this. Getting and setting HTML DOM elements. Alright, so we've selected this. So let me console or log it here. You see what I'm talking about. So that will be label score. Now if you save that and you come here, where is it? We have this paragraph here, and if you expand it, look at what we have here. You see? Alright, so see that. Now you can see that the paragraph is having its own content. Then we now have a nested element there, which is this span. So let's say we want to get the content. Now what? To get the content, I can do something like this. I'll say label label score dot text content like this. Probably let me put that in the console. Let me console the log it. So I'll do console the log. So here we are getting HTML content now. So here I'll say get content. So we are trying to get the content. Now watch what we are going to get here. Now look at, first of all, let me comment all the node, what do you call it? Let me do a multi-line comment. My console is very busy. Let me, all right, so I don't think I have any other console again. So let's see. Now look at what we have. 100, then score, then 20. But this 20 is in an array, is a span tag. But how come it's not returning the content of paragraph with the span tag, but it's only returning all the text content of the paragraph, including the span that is nested inside of the paragraph? So this explains what we have here, that text content is a property in JavaScript used to represent the text content of a node, and all its descendants. It allows you to get and to set the text content of an element. So text content returns, please listen now, this is where you need to. The text content returns the text content of all the elements under the specified node, including any nested elements, but it does not return any HTML markup. So it will return the content of a nested element and the element of this node, that's paragraph, but it will not return the HTML markup, which is the span. It won't return it. All right, it won't return it. So that is how it works. So it's still the same thing too with inner text. If I duplicate this and I do inner text, let's see inner text like this. Let's see what we have here. It is still what the same thing. You see that now, the same thing. All right. So now let's look at inner HTML now. Let's see the difference between text content and inner HTML. Now for inner HTML, it's a property in JavaScript used to represent the HTML content of an element, including any nested text HTML element, tags, and their content. It is important to note that when setting inner HTML, you are essentially replacing the existing HTML content of the element with the new content provided. This can be useful for dynamically updating the content of an element with new HTML content. All right. So now this is what it means. So if I come here, I duplicate and I do inner HTML. Let's save. Let's see the result here. Now look at, we are getting the content of the paragraph. We are also getting the HTML markup of the HTML markup of the span tag that is nested inside of the paragraph. So you see that that is HTML, inner HTML. All right, so that is getting the content. What about setting the content? So let me comment this. What about setting content? Let's say I can set content. So I'll come here, I'll say set content. So this is where we're going to stop here. Set content. So to set content is very simple. I can come here and say, okay, I want to set the content of label. Now watch, I'll set the content of label score. So that will be label score dot text content. I'll set it to, I can use a string here because text content does not support markup. All right, because if I do a markup here like h1 and I do um what should I call this now? Um Current score. All right, and I save. Now watch what we are going to get. Check the, can you see nothing is happening? The reason why nothing is happening is because we're having an error here, unexpected token. So it doesn't support it. Even though you put a quote, you wrap the h1 inside of a quote, you put it in a quote here. So this makes it what, a string. So now if you save, look at what we are going to get. Now look at, can you see h1 current scores? So it doesn't support markup. So all right, look at what we have here. It's obvious, yes, you see that. All right, so I can just remove the h1. So just leave it as a string like this. And if you save, now watch, it has been changed to what, current score. So now let's go to the element and let's see what has changed. So you go to, is it section right now? Section right, that should be label score. Look at, can you see the label, the paragraph with the class of what, label score? You can't see the span anymore. The span is no longer there anymore. Why? Because we have altered it. We have altered the content. The span is no longer there anymore. So let's try and see if we can do that with inner HTML. So with inner HTML, I can even add extra markup to it. So I'll say inner HTML. So if I do current scores, it is still going to give me that current scores. You see that? So let's check the section. Can you see current scores? But I can add extra tag to it. I can say, okay, I want a span tag of a span tag of 100, or let me do an emoji here. So to do an emoji, to get an emoji, you just type, hold on to window key and dot, on window key and dot. That's for window users. So I'll just put this here. All right, so if I save now, let's see what we are going to get here. Can you see 100? Fantastic. You are seeing 100 here. So look at it. See the label. Can you see current scores? Then we have what? A span tag. All right, good. So let's see if we can. I don't think we can give it a class name here. I don't think we can give it a class attribute here of, let's see, of score. Or instead, let me do it here. This 100 that I have here, let me cut it and paste it here. Then this one, I'll just do. See, it's already giving me error. Why? Because, so that's already giving me error because you cannot add class value to it like this. There's a way we can add class value, which is using class at class list. But if you look at this, it will still work fine. So look at, it will still work fine. So this is nice, very 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 nice, and you can, okay, this is nice, this is nice, this is nice. So that's it. That's for inner HTML. So let me just comment it and let's go back to the original content. So now back to the original content. See that? All right, good. So um we can use we can use HTML, we can use text content, inner text and inner HTML to set and to get the content of an HTML DOM element. All right. So you see, it is very very simple. So let us stop here for today, and I'll allow you to ingest this into you properly, as in adequately, so that in the next class we can start building, start adding, start manipulating this web page so that it will work for us. All right. So let's stop here for today. We'll meet again tomorrow. All right. Bye bye.